Hey, hello everybody. Thank you so much for your patience. We apologize for the delay. We're going to get started. We are just taking some time to allow folks to log on, and we're going to get going right now. Thank you so much for joining us. Your speaker today is Janice Hall, a senior consultant with the Avoca Group. Janice has over 25 years of leadership experience in pharmaceutical, biotech, CRO, and medical diagnostics. Her knowledge spans R&D sourcing, contracting, and supplier alliance management. Janice is a presenter, moderator, and panelist for various Avoca and EXL events throughout the year. In fact, Janice will be participating in a panel discussion at our Crown Congress, January 22nd to the 24th in Orlando, Florida. The panel discussion is called Improving the Working Relationship Between the Site, CRO, and Sponsor. By attending this session, you'll have the opportunity to hear from sites, CROs, and sponsors. Other members of Avoca will also be presenting in Crown Congress as well. Dennis Solati will be moderating our senior leader panel discussion titled Exploring Clinical Operations and Resources Where the Clinical Trials Are Headed for 2019. And Jay Turpin will give a talk titled Simplifying Vendor Selection and Qualification with Standards and Centralized Approaches. If you're interested in attending Crown Congress, register at exlevents.com and use discount code AVOCA to save 15% on your registration. Without further ado, I am pleased to introduce your speaker for today's webinar, Janice Hall.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate it. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. This webinar is focused on the dynamics of sites, sponsors, and CROs. We will look at how those dynamics can drive quality and productive relationships. To increase quality within the clinical trial ecosystem, it's incredibly important that we understand the sponsor, CRO, and site dynamic. These three stakeholder groups must work together to achieve the highest levels of quality possible for clinical trials. The dynamics for these three groups also drives operational productivity. They operate within a challenging regulatory landscape, and the focus is to support accelerating medicines to patients. This webinar focuses on the working relationships between sites, sponsors, and CROs by presenting leading practices that align with the findings of a joint research initiative and other industry research findings. For those of you that are not familiar with the Avoca Group, the Avoca Quality Consortium, and where we began, we will provide a brief background on these two organizations, which are at the foundation of the leading practices that we will share. We will share with you an approach we have taken to support the sponsor, CRO, and site dynamic and relationships via a new workstream called our Site Centricity Workstream. We will share some select industry publications and research on these stakeholders in the clinical trial ecosystem. We will share some key findings from an Avoca and ACRP research report on site needs and tie those needs to sharing associated leading practices associated with protocols, staff, communication, and full life cycle support. Lastly, we will share some recent data collected from a group of industry leaders on the site quality systems priorities. For those who may not be familiar with Avoca or the consortium, the Avoca Group is a life sciences consulting firm founded in 1999 and dedicated to improving quality and compliance in the clinical trial execution process. Through our consulting and research services, we conduct annual research on key challenges we face within the industry and share our findings at leading conferences. Our 2011 research revealed that there was a divergence in the perception of quality, specifically the level of quality that sponsors felt they were getting from providers versus what providers felt they were delivering. These findings were shared with the FDA, and Avoca was asked by the FDA if we could help overcome those challenges. That was the start of the Avoca Quality Consortium. The Avoca Group also has a third part of the business focused on transforming provider qualification via the Diligent Qualification Platform, which is outside the scope of this session. So the Quality Consortium itself was established in 2011 and has since developed over 450 leading practices for its members. Each member organization receives company-wide access to the Knowledge Center containing these leading practices, as well as access to archived research reports and webinars. These leading practices are developed by synthesizing content from a wide range of sources, including donated member leading practice materials, health authority regulations and guidance documents, expert group publications, thought leader presentations, technical papers, and blogs. The consortium consists of nearly 100 member companies, and the member companies include small, medium, and large biopharmaceutical organizations, as well as clinical service providers, with roughly 70% that are sponsor companies. If your company's name is on this slide and you don't know how to access the Knowledge Center, contact us after the webinar to request login instructions. And if you don't see your member's company name on this slide and want to learn about becoming a member, visit our website or contact us after the webinar. So we're going to start this session with a polling question. First, we'd like to know who is in the audience and what responsibilities you have. So if you can identify what your, I'll back up, sorry, I might have done that wrong. You can identify what type of organization you are in. And Amy, I'm not sure if by advancing it, I might have messed myself up. So am I still okay?
Still okay on my side.
Okay, good. Okay, so do I stop this or will you stop the polling when it's done?
It should not forward without you moving it.
Okay, so go ahead and forward it. Okay, so it looks like we have 50% of the audience from sponsor companies, about 32% from CROs, so that's over 80, that's 82%, seems to be our largest audience, but it's good to see some investigator site representatives and some others. Okay, so next question, what of the following descriptors most closely ties to your job role as it relates to clinical trial activities? So if you can just choose one. Okay, and so I'm going to go ahead and advance. I don't have visibility to see if we're, I'm still seeing 0, so. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, may not be fully populating. My bad. Okay, here we go. All right, my apologies here. So it looks like we have a large group coming from clinical operations and functional area heads, but we do have an even mix between team leaders and clinical team representatives. So, but I'm glad, oh, we've got a large group from quality management. Okay, excellent. All right, so hopefully what you will see in this session, you'll be able to readily use going forward. So now we'll share with you some background on the Site Centricity Workstream. Avoca and the Association for Clinical Research partnered in 2018 to conduct site-focused research to evaluate attributes that drive quality in clinical trials. Nearly 300 staff responded to this survey. We also asked sites to identify sponsor and CRO organizations that embody those attributes, resulting in AQC and ACRP site quality awards. And another key milestone was delivering a white paper on becoming a sponsor or CRO of choice from the site's perspective. It provides quantitative data on the specific attributes that matter most to sites and offers suggestions on how to improve site relationships. Another highlight includes delivery of the first set of numerous leading practices that will ease the quality management and inspection preparation burden on sponsors and CROs when assisting sites through the use of various tools. We will focus on a set of leading practices in this session, and we'll share the key findings of our site-focused research. So for the purposes of this webinar, we researched recent history reviewing publications and industry research on the dynamics of sponsors and CROs and sites. Some of the slides I will be sharing have a great deal of detail to enable you to look at what we found, While we won't be drilling down into these studies or publications specifically, we will share, though, some key messages. What we found was extensive research on sponsor and CRO relationships and how to improve upon those dynamics. Investigator sites and their needs and interests were noticeably absent from these specific publications. We found many studies and publications on what sponsors want from CROs, and this just shows only a few. It's fairly consistent. Sponsors want flawless execution. They want expertise in manpower. They want excellent delivery, meaningful high-touch services, and tailored support that's flexible. We found a representative presentation on what CROs want from sponsors. They want better communication, collaboration, and transparency. They mentioned wanting to be involved earlier, before the protocol design stage, and they want well-designed protocols that avoid the need for amendments. You can see that there are other specific needs that they've articulated. As will be seen, many of the attributes that CROs value in a sponsor partner are the same as those expressed by sites. As mentioned previously, there has not been much industry research on the inclusion of site needs and interests as part of the sponsor-CRO dynamics of conducting clinical research. We were able to find the following list of publications, of which 2 were an output of industry research. Through a detailed review of these publications, we can share with you many great nuggets of good advice for how to improve upon the sponsor-CRO and site three-way partnerships that are vital for driving quality and compliance while supporting efficiencies and reducing costs. We believe this is a three-legged model, like a stool, where if one of these legs is not well built and supported, it will collapse. So quality is driven by all 3 of these stakeholders. Now, this is a busy slide. In a recent webinar around a related topic, we were asked to provide more concrete examples. So the table on this and the next slide highlights key messages that came from those publications. This is where I want to share some of the detail to get those concepts out. So this is where we drill down a bit. First, 40% of investigators drop out of clinical research. There is a phenomenon called one and done, whereby investigators conduct one trial and quit. We need to take a more strategic view of site relationships and invest up front in initiatives designed to get it right the first time versus paying for rescues or having investigators drop out of research. Sponsors need to have the right level of involvement when outsourcing without overlapping with CRO activities. Participation that is not too much or not too little. This shows sponsor commitment to sites but isn't interfering with CRO activities. CROs have a great depth and breadth of knowledge from working with a wide range of sponsors. Their advice should be sought and taken. I'm hearing some background noise, so if we can mute. A strong PI cannot succeed without a strong team. Sponsors and CROs should help sites beyond simple protocol training and help them with their challenges. Clinical operations teams may not understand site challenges or needs. We could consider reorganizing ClinOps around the needs of sites and engage in productive dialogue over complex issues, and shift an emphasis to understanding the clinical trial experience from the view of PIs, site staff, and patients. Sites feel there's a lack of transparency to overall study plan management. We could provide sites with early visibility and input into logistics and decisions that affect them. And protocol design does not always align to standard of care workflow. We can help sites via patient and site-centric protocol designs and seek CRO, site, and patient input during protocol development versus afterwards. So in addition to this, except for some KOL input, sponsors rarely seek input from CROs, sites, and patients. We believe that conducting protocol walkthroughs at sites with CROs can help pressure test protocols, especially in the geographic area in which it will be conducted. We think that this also should be done by entities who are at an arm's length from the protocol authors to avoid any conflicts in identifying design issues. Also, site payments are notoriously slow in coming to the sites. They lack transparency and granularity and often have errors or inaccuracies. This is wasting a lot of time for sites when it comes to reconciliation, so we need a better payment model in the industry. Also, e-clinical technologies are increasing site work burdens and performance inefficiencies. Sites work with a vast array of technologies and a dizzying combination of user IDs and passwords, often with duplicative work across systems and manual transcriptions. So we need to ensure technologies introduced are selected with the site needs in mind. And it would be reasonable to consider technology tests and workflows as simulations to see how they would operate at the site level. Sites also prefer patient-facing work, such as recruitment and screening, so we should limit any non-patient-facing tasks for them where possible. And lastly, most sites never receive feedback on study performance other than recruitment metrics. So we need to seek mutual sponsor, CRO, and site agreement on benchmarks, metrics, and reports, and share metrics reports in real-time, transparent manner, so it's obvious when things are going wrong, and that we have that visibility so people focus on solutions. Some of this harkens back to the days when the industry migrated from paper CRFs to EDC. This transition occurred to support the interests of sponsors and CROs, but I recall hearing that the needs and interests of sites were often left out of the equation. This change was difficult for sites to adapt to, requiring new processes, new workflow, new staff, and competencies. Site needs and interests are paramount for managing industry changes when many other complexities are being presented to sites. Also, our CROs have needs and interests that are vital for delivering quality and efficiencies for their clients. All of these parties have a stake in ensuring the complexities, as tabulated here, are well managed. So there are various industry initiatives that have been launched to resolve or minimize some of the challenges that I've just shared with you. As shown here, the Avoca's Site Centricity Workstream is in place to develop leading practices to drive site quality and inspection readiness. But we also want to applaud other organizations like Transcelerate with their shared investigator platform and investigator registry. The Society for Clinical Research has a site study dashboard, and they also are in a collaboration for a common language evaluation reconciliation project that's for supporting contract clauses that are most challenging. There are also many CRO-specific initiatives and site-driven initiatives. We're going to take a closer look at the findings of the joint AQC and ACRP research, which was a driver for developing some of the industry-leading practices out of the Site Centricity Workstream. But before we do that, we want to ask a polling question. And so with this question, what of the following solutions would be most helpful in closing the sponsor, CRO, and site gaps that exist? Would it be development or definition of a common master clinical trial agreement, a site quality agreement, a central repository for site regulatory documents, industry standardized training on e-clinical technologies, a reference model for an electronic investigator site file, document sharing platform, standardized tools and templates, standardized training for staff, competencies and certification, customized training, and other. Okay, let's take a look and see what results. I'm not sure I'm getting this right because thought apologies here. Maybe taking a second file. All right, I'm not sure why that polling question is giving me difficulty. Okay, it looks like that one is not cooperating. I lost it there for a second. Let's see if it's coming up now. Okay, let's see what's happening with the results, because the results aren't coming up on my screen. Here we go. Okay. I'm not sure why that happened, but it looks like, not sure if I believe what's showing up here. Likelihood of 100% or complexity of protocol design and competencies. I'm wondering if we had an issue with that polling question. So my apologies if that's what occurred. I'm going to go ahead and keep on advancing. Okay, so the joint AQC and ACRP research had 4 key findings for becoming a sponsor or CRO of choice for investigator sites. A clear call to action arose from the research and for which the industry should support these critical site needs. First, it's important to focus on protocol quality. Sponsors need to design studies with site feasibility in mind, focusing on entry criteria and schedule of visits and procedures. A second attribute is related to staff, having adequately trained staff who are knowledgeable regarding the protocol and indication, and that their staff are organized, prepared, and have important soft skills. The sponsor of choice also ensures efficient and effective communication. I think this advanced too far. Okay. It looks like advanced a number of pages. My apologies. So I don't know how we got onto that page, but I will jump ahead. 26. Let me back up. And my apologies, but it seems like it's not advancing correctly. All right, since it's not advancing correctly, I'll take it from this. All right, this looks like it backed up. My apologies. Okay, so a protocol design, staff as a secondary attribute, communication that is clear, concise, and timely, and providing full-time life cycle support. So these are the 4 findings. Okay. Don't know why I'm not getting advanced. The 4 findings from the research. Let's scooch this down. All right, Amy, I don't know as a producer if you can advance slides because I've hit it 4 times and now it's advanced up to 28. So it's jumping slides for me. All right.
No problem, Janet. What slide are we on?
Okay, we should be on, my apologies, but slide 27. I'm pushing to the audience and it's stuck on slide 29 for me. So I'm going to go ahead and jump through on slide 29. I'm going to try to keep it moving from slide 29. So what led up to, all right, you got me to 27. Thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Right.
There may be some lag, so just give it some time.
Okay. All right. So, so this is how can we accomplish developing a high quality protocol. This is something that was forefront for sponsors and CROs. And so what we're showing you here are the key elements of a high-quality protocol development process. You start off by defining meaningful scientific questions. Scientific questions are that are addressed by the protocol have often been decided by an asset development team, usually based on regulatory requirements and desire for market differentiation. Often in this process, key opinion leaders have been relied upon to define what represents clinical meaningful outcomes. But this traditional approach is now starting to be questioned. With the advent of internet and social media, researchers now have direct access to the patient voice. And we're finding gaps in our standing perceptions about the patient experience, and what we are hearing from patients directly have cast doubt on the assumption that healthcare givers can serve as effective proxies. The ability to obtain approval for and competitively market medical products may depend on incorporation of the patient voice into a protocol's research questions. At the second stage, it involves defining the specific methodology used to get the scientific questions answered, namely to construct an approach that's robust and thorough, but as sparing as possible in terms of time, resources, and risks. Careful work at this stage promises the highest yields in terms of on-time and high-quality results. Several tools and approaches are available in the industry to help guide protocol authors and to drive improvements, including obtaining targeted input from sites, KOLs, patients, functions, and partners to gather information regarding standard of care expectations, ease of execution of procedures, and others. Leading practice should consider scrutiny of procedures and eligibility criteria, particularly those that create wait time, expense, and the need for data reconciliation. This scrutiny can ensure that all protocol elements are truly key to one or more of the protocol objectives. Simulations of protocol execution, also referred to as walkthroughs, may be used during the stage of protocol development to assess protocol design. Developers observe performance of the study by research personnel in a simulated clinical setting. When video recorded, viewing and reviewing walkthroughs can help reveal potential issues with design, timing, training, complexity, and practicality that could lead to protocol errors and inefficiencies. The purpose of the third stage is to enable effective protocol authoring, including obtaining functional input. The leading practice is the use of an authoring team with a defined clinical scientist as leader. As a leading practice, other team members usually include functional area representatives, but should also include external members like CROs and investigator site representatives to ensure that all interests of stakeholders in trial execution are represented during the authoring stage. The purpose of the fourth stage is to provide leading practices for protocol review, quality control, and approval to ensure all stakeholders in the operational execution and outcome of a protocol have ample opportunity to contribute their expertise and critical thinking to the protocol. Leading practice reviewers should feel obligated to challenge its assumptions, the feasibility, the logistics, and complexity, to critically evaluate all technical and safety aspects of the proposed trial, and to consider and offer alternatives that may lead to higher quality, lower risk, or greater efficiency for stakeholders. Required reviewers typically include individuals from many functions, but should include patient advocacy representatives, site representatives, and CRO vendor team members. The last stage of development is to assess the implementation experience and measure performance not only at the level of the individual protocol, but the whole process in general. Leading practice organizations will also apply the utilization of a formal lessons learned process to identify any need for systemic process improvements. All of these activities will drive toward the one attribute that is important to CROs and most important to sites, that of a high-quality protocol that is sound and feasible for all stakeholders. The quality of the protocol will often have an impact and impinge on the relationships and dynamics between the sponsor, the CRO, and the site. So during stage 4 of those 5 stages of protocol development that I just showed, we mentioned conducting a thorough protocol review. As a leading practice, a third party who is not associated with the study team or protocol development conducts a review to perform quality control. In this example, this leading practice shows a checklist of the things to be considering as part of that review of the quality. Some items, and we highlight them in our checklist, some items should be reviewed if changes are to be made, they should be reviewed with the protocol committee. But what you will be wanting to look at is, have you considered obtaining input from sites or patients as it relates to the inclusion and exclusion criteria? Or have you obtained input regarding the actual protocol design? Returning to those 4 key research findings on how to become a sponsor or CRO of choice, the second attribute is related to staff. This attribute includes that sponsors and CROs of choice have adequately trained staff who are knowledgeable regarding the protocol and indication. Their staff are organized, well prepared, and have important soft skills. The increasing complexity of trials calls for advancing staff competencies beyond simple source document verification and box checking. We need to improve the quality of the people conducting research, whether that's sponsor, CRO, or site staff. The industry has moved forward on this front to develop competencies for clinical research professionals via the ACRP, as shown here. These are geared more towards sponsor and CRO staff, but the ACRP has also developed similar competencies for site staff. It is equally important that site staff have these competencies. There is a need to define education, training, and career paths for site research staff. We need to set them up for success by investing time with them. Ways to do this may include inviting site research coordinators to investigator meetings or setting up dedicated site research coordinator meetings, either in person or via virtual meetings. Other options to consider include conducting periodic training, skills training for site coordinators. How can the industry offer sites to support making that happen? So a means to support that is shown here by a systematic leading practice approach for onboarding and orientation and training of site staff. I will share with you an excerpt of this leading practice shortly. The first one here is on-site onboarding and training of trial staff. But what we also have as part of this leading practice are a collection of templates that are used within the process, as shown in this table and in the next slide. The process includes templates such as a sample training matrix, a template for documenting staff qualifications and developing a specific onboarding plan, an orientation agenda and schedule, a training plan template, a form for documenting on-the-job training, and a form for manager review of staff training files. The process also includes a list of other templates such as a form for documenting procedural review training, remote training, protocol training, etc., including a glossary of terms. So what does one of these look like? The primary process document for staff orientation and onboarding is shown here. This is our leading practice, and the table of contents offers a glimpse into a systematic approach that is shown here. A well thought out and systematic approach to onboarding supports prompt integration, improves productivity, builds loyalty and engagement, and helps set up employees for success. Another benefit is staff retention. Research has shown that 35% of employees make a decision in the first month whether they will stay with their new employer. Those organizations that implement a consistent approach to onboarding report a 54% greater new hire productivity rate, along with a 50% greater new hire retention rate. The industry would benefit considerably by supporting sites in this key attribute. So we're going to do another polling question, this question is around a quality management system for your sites and for your own quality management systems. So how confident are you that your quality management system is sufficient in fostering a successful working relationship between you and your partners? Okay, so what we're seeing here is that the good thing is 20% are very confident and 50% are somewhat confident, but we do have 30% of the group that is saying that they're not confident. So obviously anything that we can do as an industry to advance our quality management systems to foster that successful working relationship. Things that come to mind for me are things like governance and communication plans and other means like that to help support your working relationships. Okay, so let's go on to the next attribute. The third attribute is around communication. Sponsors and CROs of choice ensure effective communication, which is clear, concise, timely, and the staff make themselves available for and are responsive to questions and concerns. This refers to communication style and your ability to use time efficiently, clarity of instructions, and responsiveness. How can the industry provide this kind of support in the clinical trials ecosystem? Well, sites want effective communication without being overburdened. We can consider providing some of the kinds of tools as shown here. This list is of tools that we apply to a CRO and sponsor communication framework that they can readily apply for communication with sites. Things such as a communication management plan, a communication matrix, providing lists of systems and technologies, standard reports, lists and contact info for subject matter experts. Also, frequently asked questions. This is something that's very important because that will be unique to each protocol. And what we should ask about their communication needs periodically. What are the things that we should start doing? What should we continue to do because it's working well? And what should we stop doing? Are there ideas for providing laminated cards that address key information? Do organizations conduct lessons learned sessions with their partners? Can you, as a company, as a CRO, as a sponsor, can you develop or use tools that would facilitate those practices so staff can efficiently conduct lessons learned sessions? Here's an example of a communication tool that can be completed that can support clarity of communication. This is a communication matrix to consolidate critical information that sponsors, site staff, and CROs need for key topics, whether it's regarding a system issue like IXRS or process issues such as reporting a safety event. Now I'm going to share the last of the 4 key attributes on becoming a sponsor of choice, and it's titled Full Lifecycle Support. Sponsors support sites throughout the entire life cycle, including study closeout and inspection preparation. Does your organization provide full life cycle support? When there's a study closeout visit, is that the end of your commitment? To support full life cycle support, the following leading practices can support that need. Here are some leading practices to consider to support sites when it comes to inspection readiness, such as an inspection readiness preparation guide for orienting staff, inspection preparation tool, functional inspection preparation checklist, interview questions. These are common interview questions that sites will be asked during inspections. Logistics and coordination. This is a best practice process for the conduct of inspections at the site. Leading practices for inspection follow-up. And one that I like is our most challenging questions tool This is to prepare responses to compliance issues that are known by the investigator and site ahead of the inspection in order for all site interviewees to present it in a clear, consistent, and complete manner. Let's look at an excerpt of one of these leading practices called a site inspection preparation tool. This tool is a guide that addresses aspects of inspections from the site perspective. So you can see here that we offer a fairly detailed process for helping sites with understanding what occurs during an inspection and what to be thinking about. Sharing, or even better, training sites on a leading practice for inspection preparation will go a long way to raise the capabilities of the site and the competencies of the staff. This gets back to the earlier suggestion for the industry that we should be willing to invest in our partners to drive quality and efficiencies. We want to avoid the phenomenon of one and done, where new investigators drop out of clinical research after one study. We all have a vested interest in reversing that trend, and inclusion of the interests of sites into the sponsor CRO dynamic can hopefully motivate these new sites to continue to conduct clinical trials. So now I'm going to share with you some recent industry feedback. In this case, this was from members of the AQC at our fall meeting just this last October. And it gives you some insight about priorities, at least with respect to the audience here. So we asked the audience, when presenting the elements of a site quality management system, which of these three leading practice topic areas are most critical for your organization to support site quality and inspection readiness? So there were resources, metrics and framework, KPIs and KQIs, policies and procedures, training, risk management, knowledge management, quality culture, inspection and audit management, issue management and CAPAs, documentation and investigator site files, and external service providers. The three that were listed at the highest areas are training, risk management, and quality culture. But having said that, three others really were fairly high: the resources, policies and procedures, and issue management. So this gives us a signal, at least from this specific group, this audience here, what is most important to them as things that we as an industry should commit to help with sites. When we ask this audience what proportion of clinical sites participating in your clinical trials have these elements in place, the worrisome thing is if you look at the green and orange here, it's 50% or less of these feel these sites have quality management systems in place. And 29% of the audience did not know what QMS elements their sites have in place. And that's a lot of unknowns when we're working with these vital partners. So we all should be partnering in a positive relationship to help support our sites as it relates to either helping them set up quality management systems or to enhance what they have in place. In another question presented to a smaller audience, we asked about preferences and priorities for go-forward efforts. In this case, an overwhelming number felt that the next most valuable leading practice area for the industry to focus on is site protocol risk and risk management planning. There was also clear support for site quality agreements and site quality management planning. So in summary, given the increasing complexity of the clinical trial landscape, we find it is important that sponsors, sites, and CROs join hands in overcoming the challenges that we face. Within this landscape, the sponsor, site, and CRO dynamic is vitally important. We are now seeing a shift of focus toward addressing not only sponsor and CRO needs, but site challenges and needs. By sharing the findings of industry research on this dynamic, we are learning where we can focus our energies for driving quality, compliance, and efficiencies while reducing risk and hopefully reducing costs for all stakeholders. The industry is showing that commitment by various initiatives for which the AQC is delivering leading practice guides, processes, and tools to help sites build or enhance their quality management systems. But we're seeing other organizations that are helping, and we think that that's a positive for what we're doing in clinical research. We hope you can be a part of that commitment so we can accelerate the development of critical medicines to patients. So if you have any questions, I believe you can use the Q&A function and forward that within the web tool. And in the meantime, I'd like to share with you upcoming events on this slide as it relates to the Avoca Quality Consortium and EXL Pharma. So at this stage, we'll hold off and see what questions come in. So, Lori, I believe you'll let me know if there are questions.
I am starting to see questions come in now. The first one is, you mentioned that these leading practices were developed by the Avoca Quality Consortium. Can you explain how they're developed?
Sure, yeah. So the site quality management system leading practices start off, they're developed by our Avoca subject matter experts who have experience in specific areas, and in this case, there were two individuals that had a focus on site quality management systems. Where we begin with all of our leading practices, we set up and seek input from an AQC leadership advisory board. So we ask members of the AQC that are interested to share initial thinking of the challenges and gaps that we face around that topic area. So in this case, around site quality, as well as around challenges working with CROs and the relationships, and what we can do to develop leading practices to address those issues. Then we conduct research within the industry looking at best practices that come from the AQC members. They'll share their information with us confidentially. We also look at regulations and guidance documents. We look at what thought leaders are saying at conferences. We review technical papers and white papers, and we monitor what other expert groups are doing. And then after getting a broad perspective, we synthesize what appear to be the best leading practices out there and develop the documentation, whether it's a process, whether it's a standard or tool. And then after doing that, we put it through a multi-step review. First, it goes through Avoca subject matter expert reviews. Then the leadership advisory board members do a review. And then we also open it up for peer review to the AQC members at large. At that point, the author incorporates feedback, and then we post these new leading practices to the library and announce it via an online community. So that's the whole process of how these leading practices are developed.
Wow, that sounds like a very detailed process and very thorough.
Any other questions?
Yeah, another question has come in. How is the AQC sharing these leading practices with sites?
Okay, well, AQC members themselves download them and cascade them through their organizations to the teams. And then those teams, when they identify sites that are in need of developing a QMS system or interested in improving their existing systems, they're shared directly. But another means for sites to access them is via a service called Blue Cloud, where a subset of them are being made available without AQC member involvement.
Okay. And I'm guessing if anyone has questions about how to get more information about membership to the AQC or about how to access those documents by Blue Cloud, they can contact Avoca directly.
Yes, thanks.
All right, perfect. Let's see. Another question for you, Janice. What is the next priority for the site-based leading practices?
Okay, well, we currently, this is a new work stream for us. It just got started in 2018. Currently, there are 19 leading practices in the library, and 23 new leading practice guides and tools are going into peer review pretty much as we speak. The current ones we have are focused on resources, training, and quality culture. The new ones that are coming in right now are focused on policies, procedures, and risk management. And then additional ones are targeted for 2019, and they focus on all those components that I shared with you for comprehensive site-based quality management system. So you saw in that one bar chart, there are things like metrics and other topic areas. So those will be targeted in 2019 to fill it out.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No, those are all the questions that have come in. So,
okay.
Wrap up. I think Amy has something too to say here at the end.
Absolutely. So thank you all so much for your time today. We hope you found this webinar valuable and informative. Within the next 48 to 72 hours, you will receive an email with a link to today's recording as well as a copy of the slides. For anyone who joined the call late, I'd like to take a moment to mention that Janice will be speaking at the 8th Crown Congress this January 22nd to the 24th in Orlando, Florida. She will be participating on a panel discussion called Improving the Working Relationship Between the Site, CRO, and Sponsor. By attending this session, you'll have the opportunity to hear from sites, CROs, and sponsors. Other members of the Avoca Group will be participating in the Crown Congress as well, one being Dennis Salati, who will be moderating our Senior Leaders panel titled Exploring Clinical Operations and Resources, Where Are Clinical Trials Headed for 2019? Also, we have Jay Turpin, who will give a talk titled Simplifying Vendor Selection and Qualification with Standards and Centralized Approaches. If you're interested in attending the Crown Congress, register at exlevents.com and use discount code AVOCA to save 15% on your registration. Thank you again for participating in this webinar and have a good rest of your day.